Something unexpected happened today in Melbourne. Not during qualifying. Not during the race. On the very first day of the 2026 Formula One season, Lewis Hamilton stepped out of the Ferrari garage, looked at the data from the SF-26, and revealed something that immediately made engineers across the paddock pay attention. Because according to Hamilton, Ferrari may already have the foundation of a championship car. But he also warned about something far more important. One detail that could decide whether Ferrari dominates this season or collapses under pressure. And that revelation came after just one day of running at the Australian Grand Prix. Here is why this is so shocking. During the opening practice session in Melbourne, Ferrari immediately placed both cars at the top of the timing screens. Charles Leclerc finished first. Lewis Hamilton finished second. A Ferrari won too, on the very first practice session of the entire season. That alone was enough to send a message to the rest of the grid. But the lap times are not the real story. Because hidden inside the Ferrari SF-26 is one of the most aggressive technical designs in modern Formula One. A completely new engine concept. A radical aerodynamic platform. And a level of acceleration that some analysts believe could give Ferrari one of the strongest launches from 0 to 200 km/h on the grid. But what Lewis Hamilton revealed after stepping out of the car might be even more important than the speed itself. Because if what he said about the SF-26 is true, then the entire balance of the 2026 championship might have just changed. And the rest of the paddock may already be realizing it. Before we break down exactly what Hamilton revealed after his first day in Australia, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because if Ferrari's early pace is real, this season could become one of the most dramatic Formula One battles in years. What makes Hamilton's revelation so important is when it happened. Because the first day of a Formula One season is usually the most misleading moment of the entire year. Teams hide performance. Engine modes are conservative. Fuel loads vary dramatically. One car might be running with a heavy race simulation, while another is doing a short qualifying run. That is why engineers normally refuse to draw conclusions on a Friday. But something about Ferrari's performance today made people look twice. Because the speed did not appear suddenly. It appeared immediately. From the first laps of free practice 1. Charles Leclerc was the first to show it. As the session progressed, the Ferrari began climbing the timing screens. Sector after sector improving. Until suddenly the name at the top was Ferrari. Leclerc first. Hamilton right behind him. A Ferrari won too. On the very first practice session of the 2026 season. For many teams, that could have been dismissed as a light fuel run. But observers watching the car on track noticed something far more interesting than the lap time itself. The Ferrari looked incredibly stable. Through the fast corners of Albert Park, the SF-26 stayed completely planted. No nervous rear. No sudden corrections. And when the drivers accelerated out of the slow corners, the car simply launched forward. That kind of behavior is extremely valuable in Formula One. Because traction is where lap time is created. Every clean exit from a corner becomes extra speed down the following straight. And on a circuit like Melbourne, where many corners lead directly into acceleration zones, that advantage multiplies lap after lap. But the real surprise came from the other side of the Ferrari garage. Lewis Hamilton. This is now his second season with Ferrari. The adaptation period is gone. The language between driver and engineers is already established. And today, Hamilton looked completely comfortable inside the SF-26. His radio messages were calm. Very precise. Small setup adjustments. Fine-tuning the front balance. Stabilizing the rear on exit. Those are not the comments of a driver still trying to understand a new machine. Those are the comments of a driver already exploring the limit. And that is exactly why Hamilton's comments after the session became so interesting. Because instead of celebrating the pace, he immediately pointed to something deeper. He said the car has huge potential. But it demands discipline. Discipline in setup. Discipline in driving. Discipline in how the team manages the weekend. Which reveals something very important about the Ferrari SF-26. The car is fast. But it is also extremely complex. Ferrari engineers have designed one of the most aggressive technical concepts on the grid. A compact power unit, extremely tight bodywork, and an aerodynamic system that relies heavily on how airflow moves underneath the car. Even the exhaust system plays a role in how the diffuser generates downforce when the driver accelerates. In simple terms, the harder the driver pushes the throttle, the more the airflow underneath the car stabilizes the rear. That is why the Ferrari looked so planted when exiting corners today. It is a clever concept. But aggressive concepts often come with narrow operating windows. Small changes in temperature. Small setup mistakes. Even wind direction can influence the aerodynamic balance. That is exactly why Hamilton repeated the same word: discipline. Because if Ferrari manages this car correctly, the potential could be enormous. But if they miscalculate even slightly, the performance could disappear very quickly. And that is what makes the next part of today's story even more fascinating. Because when the second practice session began, the entire competitive picture started to shift. But when the second practice session began, the story became even more interesting. Because free practice 2 is where teams usually start revealing their real pace. Fuel loads drop. Softer tires appear. Engine modes become more aggressive. And suddenly, the timing screens begin to tell a more realistic story about the competitive order. At first, it looked like Ferrari might lose the spotlight. McLaren came alive. Oscar Piastri delivered a very strong lap and jumped to the top of the timesheets. Mercedes also looked fast. George Russell placed himself near the front. Andrea Kimi Antonelli followed closely. For a moment, it seemed like the early Ferrari dominance from the first session might disappear. But something important happened as the session continued. Ferrari never left the fight. Leclerc stayed inside the top group. Hamilton stayed right there as well. Not dominating the session, but always present. Always close. Close enough to confirm something very important. The speed we saw earlier was not an illusion. The Ferrari SF-26 was genuinely competitive. And the deeper engineers looked at the data coming from the track, the more impressive the picture became. Because the Ferrari was not just producing one fast lap. It was producing consistent laps. Again, and again, and again. No sudden drops in performance. No strange tire behavior. Just stable pace across longer runs. That detail matters far more than a single fast lap. Because championships are not won with one qualifying lap. They are won with race pace, tire management, energy control, consistency across long stints. And early indications from today suggested the Ferrari might have exactly that balance. Observers watching the onboard cameras noticed how calm the car looked through the fast sections of Albert Park. High-speed direction changes, heavy braking zones, quick acceleration out of slow corners. In all of those situations, the Ferrari looked stable, predictable, almost comfortable. That kind of behavior usually indicates something very valuable in Formula One. A strong aerodynamic platform. When the airflow underneath the car remains stable, the driver can push harder without fighting the rear of the car. And when the driver can trust the car, lap time becomes easier to find. That is exactly why both Ferrari drivers looked confident today. Leclerc attacked the corners with his usual precision. Hamilton looked calm and controlled. Not forcing the car. Just extracting performance lap after lap. But the most important detail from the entire session was something that did not appear on the timing screens. Reliability. Both Ferrari drivers completed their programs without any technical problems. No overheating issues. No strange radio calls. No mechanical concerns. And that is extremely significant. Because the SF-26 is not a conservative design. It is one of the most aggressive cars Ferrari has produced in years. The power unit runs at extremely high combustion pressures. The bodywork packaging is extremely tight. The aerodynamic concept relies heavily on complex airflow behavior under the floor. Cars with this kind of ambition often struggle during the early races. Cooling issues, energy management problems, unexpected reliability concerns. Yet on the first day of the season, none of those problems appeared. Everything ran smoothly. Which is exactly why Hamilton's comments after the session suddenly sounded much more important. Because when he spoke about discipline, he was not just talking about driving. He was talking about managing a machine with enormous potential. A car that could be incredibly fast. But only if every detail is handled perfectly. And if Ferrari truly manages to unlock that potential, then the rest of the grid could be facing a very serious problem. Because there is another factor that makes this situation even more dangerous for Ferrari's rivals. Lewis Hamilton himself. And what we saw from him today might be the clearest sign yet that he is beginning to feel completely at home inside the Ferrari. And this is where today's story becomes even more important. Because what we saw from Lewis Hamilton on track did not look like a driver still adapting to Ferrari. It looked like a driver who already understands the car. That might sound like a small detail. But in Formula One, it changes everything. When a driver joins a new team, the first season is usually about learning. Learning the engineers. Learning the systems. Learning how the car behaves under different conditions. Even small things take time. How the brakes respond. How the energy deployment feels on corner exit. How the car reacts when the tires begin to fade. Most drivers need months before everything starts to feel natural. But today in Melbourne, Hamilton did not look like a driver searching for answers. He looked like a driver already asking the right questions. On the radio, his communication was calm and extremely precise. Small adjustments. Very specific feedback about balance. Minor changes to front wing angle. Tiny corrections to stabilize the rear under acceleration. Those are the types of conversations a driver normally has when he is already comfortable with the machine. And that comfort started to show in the way Hamilton drove the car. Late braking into the corners. Smooth rotation at the apex. Then very controlled acceleration on exit. No visible struggle with the rear. No sudden steering corrections. Just clean, efficient laps. That style matters. Because Hamilton at his best has never been the most aggressive driver on the grid. His greatest strength has always been control. Managing tires. Managing energy. Placing the car exactly where it needs to be lap after lap. And if the Ferrari SF-26 truly provides the stability it showed today, that combination could become extremely powerful during race conditions. Especially on circuits like Albert Park. Because Melbourne rewards drivers who can manage rhythm. Brake late. Rotate the car quickly. Then launch cleanly onto the next straight. That rhythm looked very natural for Hamilton today. But there is another layer to this story that makes Ferrari's situation even more interesting. Inside the other side of the garage, there is a driver who already knows this car extremely well. Charles Leclerc. And today, Leclerc reminded everyone why he remains one of the fastest drivers in Formula One. In the very first practice session of the season, he placed the Ferrari at the very top of the timing screens. Fast. Precise. Completely confident. Which creates a fascinating dynamic inside Ferrari. Because if the SF-26 truly becomes a championship-level car, Ferrari will suddenly have something very rare. Two drivers capable of fighting for the title. Hamilton brings experience. 7 world championships. Unmatched race management. Leclerc brings raw speed. Qualifying precision. The ability to extract maximum performance from a single lap. That combination could become one of Ferrari's greatest strengths. But it could also become one of their biggest challenges. Because if both drivers are fighting for victories, the team will eventually face difficult decisions. Strategy calls. Pit stop timing. Development priorities. Every championship team eventually reaches moments where the interests of two drivers collide. And if Ferrari truly has a car capable of winning races this season, those moments will arrive sooner rather than later. But before Ferrari even reaches that internal battle, there is one final piece of the puzzle that engineers across the paddock are still trying to understand. Something hidden deep inside the design of the Ferrari SF-26. A detail that could explain why the car accelerates the way it does. Why it looked so stable today. And why Lewis Hamilton, after stepping out of the cockpit in Melbourne, made a comment that quietly sent a message to the rest of Formula One. Because if that detail is as powerful as some engineers believe, then Ferrari may have arrived in 2026 with something the rest of the grid did not expect.